I've seen firsthand with my own eyes what is it that pushed the very same migrants that I assisted to escape poverty, injustice, inequality. Because I think that the world needs to embrace diversity, inclusion.
Both IOM and UNHCR have their work really cut out over the next decade. And if we have to see the SDGs succeed, this is going to be critical. Hello, my name is Siddharth Chatterjee, the UN Resident Coordinator in China, and welcome to Delivering as One, a UN and China conversation. In this podcast, we highlight the heads of UN agencies in China who shape our diversity, discover their motivations, and find out about their work here on the ground. Today, I'm delighted to be joined by Giuseppe Crocetti, Chief of Mission for China and Mongolia for the International Organization for Migration. Mr. Crocetti, an Italian national, joined the United Nations in China in 2019. Giuseppe, welcome to Delivering as One.
Thank you very much, Sid. It's an honor to be with you today, just around International Migrants Day. Thank you.
Welcome, my friend. So let's get started. Tell us about your early life, growing up, your studies and early career.
I was born and raised in Naples, in the south of Italy, and my parents were both teachers. So was my grandmother, who used to live with us. So you can well imagine that coming home from school with bad grades was just not an option. My grandfather was from a poor background. He was a farmer, and to escape poverty at the time of the war, he decided to migrate in the 30s, in between the two world wars, to the US. And he worked very hard, and is one of the many success stories of Italian migrants that found their way up to the top in the US. But that came with a major social price. He left behind my father, he left behind my grandmother, and all he did was work very hard to send money home so that my dad could get an education. So it was very inspirational when I had the opportunity with my father to travel to the US, and we made a stop in Ellis Island to visit the Migration Memorial Museum. And we were able to trace down the entry day when my grandfather moved to the US. That was very inspirational for me. And I was raised with stories of his plight, how difficult it was for him to integrate into new society, to be accepted, and eventually succeed. So I think somehow growing up and hearing all these stories inspired me to then make later in life choices, both on professional and personal level. And so in fact, I decided to study law, and I became a lawyer. In my early career, I practiced law before Italian courts. And in my spare time, I also work as a pro bono lawyer. And guess what? Providing free legal representation to destitute migrants, helping them fight for their legal stay rights or for their family reunification, sometimes for a dignified return home. And I thought that was probably the time where I perhaps decided to turn it into a career and join the United Nations. So as a first step, I re-enrolled at the university. I studied my master's courses on international relations. And then I've done my first experience with the United Nations just after my master's studies in Tanzania with the ICTR. So basically, I was based in East Africa, and I had the opportunity to travel for work in Rwanda and also for pleasure in Kenya. And so I realized, and I've seen firsthand with my own eyes, what is it that pushed the very same migrants that I assisted through my legal representation on a pro bono basis to escape poverty, to escape injustice, inequality. And I realized probably then that that's exactly what I wanted to do with my life. And in fact, after that experience, I joined the UN as a volunteer, embracing the principles and values of UN volunteerism. I was a United Nations volunteer specialist on human rights. And after that, I eventually joined IOM back in 2005 with the IOM's tsunami response. I've been since with the IOM, and this is basically the start of my career.
Fascinating. How fascinating. I'm sure that the audience listening to this would be really inspired to hear your early life. That's interesting. So where's your grandfather settled in the US? Which part?
In Pennsylvania.
Oh,
he was a farmer, so he started off with a mushroom farm.
Amazing. Amazing. Oh, fascinating.
I still remember him hugging me when I was very little with these gigantic hands. And those were the hands of someone who worked very hard,
On the
manual
fields.
work on the fields all his life.
Amazing. Amazing. Very touching. So, how did you then eventually come to work with the UN in China?
I was appointed Chief of Mission for China 1st December 2018. In fact, I just completed my 3 years here in China, and I transferred from Sri Lanka, where I served for 5 years also as IOM Chief of Mission for Sri Lanka and the Maldives. And prior to that, I was the IOM Chief of Mission in Papua New Guinea for 4 long years. And before that, I was in Cambodia. So you see, I basically spent my last 16 years with IOM in the region, covering South Asia, Southeast Asia, the Pacific, and now with China and Mongolia, East Asia. So in a way, if you want, you can call me a veteran of this region, and I hope that that serves me and the UN family well during my tenure.
Well, it also probably a reflection of your competence that you've been sent as the IOM chief to the biggest country with the largest population in the world, and I think is clearly a recognition of your own professional talents and competence. So, well, congratulations.
Well, thank you. It is an honor for me to be here.
So what is your organization support? What kind of support do you give to the people of China? What are the country's specific priorities and the UN family at large?
Right. So this year marks the 20th anniversary of China-IOM friendship, since China became a member state of IOM. But it also marks the 70th anniversary of IOM globally, and combined with the 50th anniversary of the restoration of the lawful seat, China in the UN, and the 100th anniversary of the CPC, I would say, as you once quoted it, this is a true season of celebrations also for us in IOM, particularly here in China. So you see, 20 years in our relations with China may not sound as long of a period as other more established agencies in the country. We've been here since the 70s, the 80s, but we're quickly catching up. We have set a liaison office in 2007. That eventually became a full-fledged country office in 2016 when China became one of our newest member states. And since then, the scope and the nature of our work has grown exponentially. And not only with China and with the broad range of government and non-government counterparts, but also with the UN family. Because you see, 2016 was a breakthrough year for IOM in China and globally. This is the year when IOM formally joined the United Nations as a related organizations. And this means that it was a true honor for me to be able to formally sign off on the United Nations Sustainable Development Cooperation Framework, because IOM was not in the past signatory to the UN Development Assistance Framework or its predecessors. It's a very exciting time for us here in China, and we see that the 20 years friendship is now paying important dividends. Now, in terms of what we do, as I said, the portfolio of our work has expanded exponentially. Today, we work on immigration and border management, labor mobility, migrant protection and assistance, migration and sustainable development, data and research, resettlement, migrant movement management, and also partnership. And I would say that such rich portfolio is not only a recognition of the good relationship that IOM has been able to build with China, but also recognition of the growing importance of migration in China. And as the country continues its process of reform and opening up, we will see more and more migrants inevitably flowing into the country, be them international students, researchers, foreign employees, technical experts, or talent more broadly. And so traditionally, China has been a country of origin, with one of the largest diaspora in the world and one of the highest ranking in the world for inward remittances. But more recently, China has also become a country of transit and a country of destinations for migrants. And while the total international migrant population in China today is about 1 million, so relatively small number compared to the size of the population, there is definitely a growing trend. And with the growing trend and with the opportunities associated to business and trades, inevitably there are also instances of irregular migration, and many migrants in an irregular status sometimes are the most vulnerable. And so they are definitely a group of concern. In response to these growing trends in migration here in China, the government has reorganized recently its all migration governance architecture, established new bodies such as the National Migration Administration, and has also become more and more vocal, participating in regional and global migration governance dialogue and discourse. And in fact, in December 2018, China was among those states in the overwhelming majority of member states of the UN who adopted the Global Compact for Safe, Orderly and Regular Migration. We are also happy to support policy dialogues with a broad range of stakeholders. China supporting the Global Compact on Migration means China promotes a wall of government and a wall of society approach to migration management. And this gives IOM an opportunity to bring together government, non-government, academia, think tank to discuss the multidimensional nature of migration as an issue. And we were also very pleased to see that this year migration featured for the first time in the newly released white paper on international cooperation, development cooperation in the new era. This is very important. This is also recognition of China's growing role in the international migration governance, as they promote true multilateralism also in the field of international migration governance.
No, well said. And the fact of the matter is, after the event on the Global Development Initiative, I was asked one of the questions on the role of global development, so to speak. And I said, after the Second World War, we are seeing the largest forced migration ever, close to 90 million people. And this includes people who are migrating out of sheer poverty or migrating climate change or migrating, fleeing conflict, instability. And I think the role of looking at safe migration is going to be absolutely critical. I mean, we know for a fact these boats that land up through Lampedusa and, deaths that we confront is just heartbreaking. So I think, I really believe that, both IOM and UNHCR have their work really cut out over the next decade. And if we have to see the SDGs succeed, this is going to be critical. Thank you. This is so important, Giuseppe. So let's go to your beneficiaries. Could you provide us with some insights on the key beneficiaries of your organization in China?
When we look at our beneficiaries, particularly in the context of leave no one behind, we look at vulnerabilities, and we do engage with a number of groups that we deem at risk or a particular heightened risk, such as vulnerable migrants. As I mentioned, in the context of the immigration reform and modernization process that China went through, China has placed emphasis on the most vulnerable migrants. And this is a testimony to China's true commitment to the implementation of the principles and vision of the Global Compact on Migration. In practical terms, what that means, we're working with the National Immigration Administration in piloting assisted voluntary return and dignified reintegration mechanisms and systems for the migrants deemed to be most vulnerable. And this is a very important component. We also work very closely with victims of trafficking in persons. This is an area of concern to the government, under the leadership of a dedicated Office to Combat Trafficking under the Ministry of Public Security, has achieved enormous accomplishment, particularly in the context of internal migration, in the context of child trafficking. We hear often on the news success stories of children in China that are united with their families after many years. And this is also the result of the introduction of innovative technological and investigative tools, such as the DNA tracing and database. And we also believe, though, that there are growing cross-border trafficking trends, both with neighboring countries as well as in other major migration corridors, for example, between China and the EU. In fact, the number of Chinese victims of trafficking for sexual exploitation in Europe and in UK rank respectively the fourth and the sixth largest group of non-EU victims of trafficking. So this is an area where we work very closely with the government. And then COVID-19 came. You know very well the Secretary General in his policy brief on COVID-19 and people on the move had placed an emphasis on the fact that the pandemic has disproportionately affected people on the move. And we do then see heightened level of vulnerabilities, but we also need to recognize that migrants have their own agency and have an important role to play in the socio-economic recovery process during and post-pandemic.
Yeah, well said. Like your grandfather who migrated to the United States.
Completely.
Look at what they did. I think the more sensitization that happens globally, and I think the Secretary General is completely seized with this matter. We have a man who really believes in this, and his heart is in the space of migration and refugees. Fantastic that that we are outspoken in that, and congratulations to IMM for the work they're doing on this. Let's now identify some of the remaining development challenges faced by China in the coming years, and how will your organization, as part of the UN family here, assist China in the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals?
Well, I would start with International Migrants Day, because this interview with you coincides with the International Migrants Day. It's just around the corner. And I would say that this year the theme is about harnessing the potential of human mobility. What does this mean? It's a day where we want to highlight the crucial role that migrants play in building stronger and sustainable communities amidst all the challenges that they face. And I would like to now quote Chinese Ambassador Song, who eloquently put it last week in his statement at the IOM Council, where he pointed out the fact that migrants are both beneficiaries and contributors of sustainable development, which is exactly, going back to your question, what our priorities for the futures are, is exactly what we as an organization in China will strive to promote. This is probably the key remaining development challenge from the perspective of our mandate. And we have just finalized our country strategy for the period 2021-2025, so as to align with the period of the cooperation framework that we have with the UN and to align with the 14th five-year plan. I would like to focus perhaps just on two of the three strategic priorities of the cooperation framework. One is people and prosperity, and the other is partnership. And I would start under people and prosperity on innovation-driven development. This is a key development principle underpinning the all 14th five-year plan, and it's centered around the concept that innovation is a key enabler for high-quality development in order to achieve China's desired independence, technological independence, and self-reliance in key strategic sectors. So how does this relate to our work? There are clear linkages between innovation and migration. And so we work very closely with the government in promoting policies that promote attraction and retention of qualified professionals, commonly known here as talent mobility. And this represents a strategic priority for China and an important feature of the growing international migrant population here. As the country continues to reform and open it up, we will see more and more opportunities. Investment in research, development in artificial intelligence, quantum information, digital technology, these are all sectors where the ability to continue advancing open policy that promote talent mobility. And I see here talent mobility. I don't want to use the word talent competition, because I truly believe that in a globalized world, the global talent mobility in the form of global alliances serves a better purpose to advance sustainable development goals and sustainable outcomes for all. So this is an area that we see great potential where we stand ready to work with China. But we also want to advance on the partnership, our work on South-South cooperation, both at the level of immigration and border management, identifying opportunities to share China's very good migration management practices and experience with the world, both in forms of international technical cooperation, but also in terms of South-South cooperation with a number of countries. And as you pointed out earlier, part of our mandate is also to work with internally displaced persons. And so we have an MOU with the Ministry of Emergency Management, and we're very happy and privileged to work with them to share China experience in disaster risk reduction, particularly the impact the disaster can have on displacement, share that experience with the world, and also advance opportunities to improve disaster risk reduction in the broader context of climate change adaptation through South-South and trilateral cooperation. IOM has also been one of the agencies that I've had the opportunity to already work with China under the South-South Cooperation Assistance Fund. We've also worked with China under the Peace and Development Fund. And now with the upcoming new initiative, the Global Development Initiative, we very much look forward to be part of this new process.
Fantastic. Bravo. So let's go on to you as a person, father, husband, all those things. What's an average day in your life? What does waking up and going to sleep mean?
Right, I have 3 offices, an office in Beijing, an office in Hong Kong, an office in Ulaanbaatar. So my day gets pretty packed very quickly. But I do make a point to take my kids to school, and I can actually walk them to school every morning, and to go back for the bedtime stories as much as
Fantastic.
I can. But on weekends, I do play football during the week. I love playing football. That keeps me fit, keeps me happy. And my daughters are following my steps. So I take them every weekend to play football.
Excellent.
And then I have a third daughter. My daughters are aged 9, 5, and 1.5. So you see, the third was born here in Beijing in the middle of the pandemic. And I can promise you, when I go home, she makes me run after her just as much as you do run with your marathons.
Lovely.
So I would say overall my time so far in China has been extremely rewarding,
Lovely.
both on a personal and professional level.
Fantastic. Lovely to hear that. Giuseppe, it warms my heart, As fathers, we have to be speaking out not just for our daughters, but all girls, that they have equal opportunities. And I think it's so critical. I think that message of yours, will resonate with many fathers with daughters. And I would encourage all fathers to also have their daughters play football. It's good for health too. So let's go to delivering as one. And what does that mean to you, Giuseppe?
I'll answer that in 2 ways. First, I will use my experience and a bit of jargon, and then I will translate that into what actually means to me. And we all know that this concept of delivering as one is dated back to late 26, and at that time, under former Secretary General, there was a push to deliver as one. This new concept was introduced. A number of pilot countries were established, 8 around the world, and that was followed by a number of self-starter countries. And I was lucky enough to serve in Papua New Guinea in 2009, when the UN country time decided to be a self-starter delivering as one UN. And so I had the opportunity then to be part of this piloting. But that was a time where we were just going to initiate a dialogue that lasted almost 15 years. Now, if you ask me today what the delivering as one means in the context of the broader reform of the UN system and in the context of a reinvigorated resident coordinator system, I would say that, using a bit of jargon perhaps, to me, really delivering as one means leveraging the unique experience and resources that each United Nations agencies possess, and that represent the added value of the UN as a whole. And so then, delivering as one, it means nothing but leading our collective actions toward one common vision. And so, as I said, this is a bit of jargon, so I want now to translate this into what it means to me in practical terms. And I'll give you an example. I mentioned to you that I love playing football. And in fact, I have had the honor to be the captain of the UN football team in the past. And so we have participated into football tournament with diplomatic missions, and we've also played friendly match with government agencies. But now, why I wanted to talk about it? Because our team was composed of male and female players, young and old players, players coming from all the agencies. And we were able to also initiate some public-private partnership. We had the private sector sponsoring our initiative.
Fantastic.
And we basically had on the pitch the UN, the private sector, and the government. And then we had the families and the friends of the UN that came in masses to support our initiative. And you see, there was a lot of enthusiasm. So it was an event where our team, which in fact was called One UN, was joined by the broader UN family. And that turned the event and the name of our team from a One UN to a One UN family.
Fantastic.
And I think when we think about delivering as one, this is a powerful metaphor. Why? When you do play football, particularly in the context of our initiative, we embrace diversity and inclusion. But to play football, the first thing you have to do is control the ball, raise up your head, and pass the ball to the player that is better positioned to deliver the goal. This is exactly what we should be doing as UN agencies. We should recognize who has a better competitive advantage to deliver on behalf of the system and encourage this or this other champion to go ahead and push and deliver rather than competing amongst each other. And this is what we learn on the pitch, and this is what I learn on a day-to-day basis through our work. So I thought I wanted to personalize a little bit my answer rather than just giving you straight UN jargon that many of our listeners probably won't necessarily relate to, but I think that this example is more relatable to many.
How interesting. This is quite fascinating, and I hope that we will set aside for the next UN country team a couple of minutes for you to kind of reflect on this. This is such an appropriate analogy of delivering as one. In fact, I recall that Kofi Annan, our former Secretary General, used to say that, I don't want a good rowing team. I want a good football team because there is scope for individual brilliance. So I think the metaphorical significance of what you've just said is just amazing. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Sid, if I may, I want to also add, and now it's going to be the dreamer side of me. I mean, if the UN can come together in one country, China, and deliver here, in the context of a sport event which brings everyone together, imagine what is the potential of many nations coming together for the Olympics and for the Paralympics, which again embrace the value of diversity and inclusion. So if these nations can come together as one word, then I think that the answer is right there, delivering as one as the whole world. And I think this is probably the inspiration that all of us as international public servants are. I do want to pause 1 second and commend Beijing municipality and China for being able to host not one, but 2 Olympic Games in the space of 15 years. Because I think that the world needs more and more of opportunities to embrace diversity, inclusion, and through sportsmanship. So I very much look forward to the upcoming Olympic Games, and I hope you and I will have an opportunity to watch some of these events together.
Fantastic. So well said, so prudently said. That shows the deep philosophical side to you, Giuseppe, which seems to have come out only during this conversation. Thank you for that. So let me conclude with one final question. What, in your view, is a good or an ideal UN resident coordinator?
I'll answer to that if you promise me not to take personally any of my answers. There are many ways you can look at it. It really depends the answer on the angle you pick. But let me answer by looking at it from the context we're in here in China. I remember you saying when you first arrived here at the UN on your very first UN town hall meeting that we as the UN were at the defining moment and we needed to make choices. We needed to decide if we wanted to be dynamic or if we wanted to be dinosaurs. And that got me thinking. And so now if I have to answer your question, what in my view is an ideal resident coordinator, I think that it goes without saying, and that is a given, that an ideal resident coordinator needs to lead his team to deliver as one. But that it's a given. So how you're going to do that, for example, in our context? And I think the key is to foster an environment of continuous innovation on what the UN does and how the UN does it. And so this basically means you as a leader needs to challenge us as head of agencies to exit our comfort zone, to challenge our own assumptions, and to disrupt, if you like, our habitual ways of thinking and doing business, so as to navigate together what you once, I remember, referred to as, and I like that, so I took note of it, a new renaissance of trade and aid. And I think that you're on the right track to be an ideal resident coordinator seat.
Thank you very much. This really wraps up our conversation, Giuseppe. Thank you very much for making the time to meet us and sharing your story and your time today. If you would like to learn more, visit china.un.org or follow UN in China on Twitter. Join us next time for another installment of Delivering as One, a UN in China conversation.